Okay, well, hi, officially, welcome to the webinar. I'm Jason Jones, Managing Principal and Service Line Leader of Cresa's Hybrid Workforce Services, and I'm joined today by Steve Ike, Senior Vice President at Cresa. Welcome to the webinar. When the healthcare crisis forced shelter-in-place and stay-at-home orders in mid-March of 2020, no one could have possibly known that an entirely new era in how and where organizations work and collaborate began. Here's what a few CEOs have had to say along the way. One CEO on the positive side said, "We're going to be the most forward-leaning company on remote work at our scale." That was Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook. Another CEO said, "Remote work will change how we manage our real estate. We will quickly move to a more open seating arrangement in which digital tools will help manage seating arrangements." That was Jamie Dimon, Chairman and CEO of JPMorgan Chase, in his annual letter to shareholders as recently as April 7th of this year, so just a month ago. But in the same letter, in fact, the very next paragraph, Jamie points out serious weaknesses of the virtual world. He says, "Performing jobs remotely does not work as well when people don't know one another. And it virtually eliminates spontaneous learning and creativity. And finally, most professionals learn their job through an apprenticeship model." So Jamie seems to be saying, yes, remote work is changing us, but there are several downsides that we're keeping our eye on. And at the complete end of the other spectrum, the negative spectrum, one CEO went so far as to say, "I don't see any positives. Not being able to get together in person, particularly internationally, is a pure negative." So that was Reed Hastings, co-CEO of Netflix. So there are CEO opinions on both sides of the issue. But what do you think? We thought it'd be interesting to poll all of you in the audience on a few questions related to your future with a hybrid workforce, just to get a sense of where everyone sits. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. And here we go. So the first question, after the pandemic, how often will your employees work remotely compared to before the pandemic? So obviously this is sort of comparing 2019 versus, let's say, 2022. Next question, after the pandemic, do you personally want to work remotely more often than you did before? So obviously more often, not necessarily than right now, if you're working all the time remotely, but going forward compared to pre-pandemic. And then of course, after the pandemic, and this is an important question, do you feel that part-time work from home will be important for your organization to recruit and retain talent? So I'll give that just a minute for everyone to cast their vote, and then we'll see what the poll says. We're about 75% voted right now. We'll give it just a couple more seconds here and see what people have to say. Okay, so that's been about a minute and a half. We've got nearly everyone has voted. Let's go ahead and share the results. So here we go. How often will your employees work remotely compared to before the pandemic? More is a very high percentage, 95%. So not surprising. 2, after the pandemic, how do you personally feel? Again, wow, really high number. 91% say yes, they would like to work remotely more often than before. And then 95% once again feel that this is an important part of recruiting and retaining talent. So these are pretty common results that we see. And let me close the polling here. But let's see what we're seeing in multiple surveys and anecdotally with our own experience, talking to many companies. Most surveys show that anywhere from 50% to up to 80% of all office-based knowledge workers, this is people who use a computer most of the day, want the flexibility to work from home and the office part-time, so both. And that sort of comports with what we just saw. But this brings new challenges. And another CEO quote. Sid Sijbrandij is the CEO of GitLab, which is an open source software firm that's never had an office since its start in 2014. It's a 100% remote company and has grown to 1,300 employees in 66 countries. When asked about the blend of working remotely and working in the office, Sid said, if you try to do hybrid, you will have an A team and a B team. Those in the office, and then those deprived of information and career opportunities. He also warned, two ways of working is very, very hard, and companies should not do it lightly. It's okay to say back to the office or all remote, but hybrid can turn out really bad. Now, I want us to pause for just a moment to really ponder what Sid said about this seemingly binary choice between either remote only or office only. Because according to Sid, hybrid can turn out really bad. But we have to remember that the new reality is approximately, let's just pick a number in the middle, 70% of office-based workers want a part-time combination of working from home and the office. And the other remaining 30% are basically split evenly between wanting full-time remote or full-time office, which means if you only offer one or the other, remote or office only, you'll limit yourself to attracting only 15% of the workforce. 85% of the workforce may look elsewhere. This is why we believe that organizations are going to figure out the hybrid approach, offering some combination from working in an office and working from home. But what's the right blend for your organization? What are the criteria for a successful strategy to make sure you're not missing anything? And how do you ensure that you're headed down the right path? To answer these questions, you need a plan. You need a plan to blend remote and office, hybrid. But the plan is going to be unique to every situation and every company, and likely unique to each department within an organization. It could be decided that some departments will need to be in the office every day. Other departments or specific job roles may only need to be in the office 3 times a month. And because of this disparity in job roles, opinions, and personal aptitudes, and because at times there are several competing interests, many leaders feel stuck and the organization is paralyzed. It's hard to find consensus on a way forward. And as one example, let's take operations. They don't want finance or HR or sales and marketing telling them what to do, deciding if and when their team is coming into the office, controlling their schedules. Because of this, many organizations are looking for a pathway forward. So, if you're contemplating a hybrid work arrangement and you're interested in answering questions such as, well, what questions should we be asking? And is there a framework to evaluate a hybrid workforce strategy? And what is the roadmap to navigate to the right blend of remote and office? Then this is the webinar for you. As I mentioned, I'm Jason Jones, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Steve Ike. I've been at Cresa for 18 years, originally as a real estate advisor, but now exclusively leading 2 of our service lines, Cresa Technology Advisory Services and Hybrid Workforce Services. Steve has over 25 years of experience providing workforce strategy expertise to companies like General Electric, Macy's, Procter & Gamble, and Kimberly-Clark, to name a few. Today, we'll have a 50-minute presentation with some Q&A at the end. As I mentioned before we started, we'll record the webinar and send a copy out afterwards. Please ask questions through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And make comments too. Just a thought or an opinion as you hear something throughout the webinar that you have a thought on or that you have experience with. Please share it with us, and we'll monitor the Q&A and address all the questions at the end of the webinar. So today, we're going to address context for where we are in the timeline of the COVID-19 experience from a work perspective, benefits and challenges of a hybrid workforce strategy, its key elements, and a roadmap to build a sustainable strategy. So we start with context for where we are in the timeline of the pandemic. Phase 1 was the immediate phase. People were forced to vacate their offices and work from home. Phase 2 is the endure phase. We've been enduring, leveraging technology, modifying workflows, and working to maintain our culture. All things considered, it's gone pretty well. Phase 3, though, will be the sustain and compete phase. This is the long-term post-COVID phase. Organizations will work to sustain a new way of working that leverages what they have learned about remote work while recapturing all of the benefits of a shared central office. But to get from phase 2 to phase 3, we have to go through a transition. And that is where we are right now. Or should I say, that's where we should be right now. Forward-thinking leaders are there, taking advantage of this time to invest and prepare for the future and asking a key question, which is, how do we transition? They know that there's a danger of being caught flat-footed when the pandemic subsides and they can return to the office. That's when they'll be forced to make decisions about who works where and when. And perhaps even sooner, they'll need to respond to their employees who are expressing a desire to continue working from home part-time. And those employees are wondering, what's our policy? And maybe they're asking themselves questions like, how many days am I going to commute? What does my commute look like going forward? And where should I live? Should I sign that apartment lease? Should I re-up? I moved away during the pandemic, and should I get back closer to the office? I mean, there's all sorts of life questions that employees are asking themselves. And whatever policy it is that organizations come up with, they're going to need to be able to support their workforce, no matter where they are, home or office or other location, by using a combination of technology, human resource policies, and work processes. It's going to be a real challenge, and we don't want to see leaders rushed to approve plans and make decisions they're not prepared for. But before we answer the question of how do we transition, we must first answer, well, what exactly are we transitioning to? And why do we want to go there? What are its benefits? And finally, what are the inherent challenges? Then let's talk about how to get there. Now, for the first 3 leadership questions today, we're going to provide a framework for thinking about the workforce and the workplace in a new light. For the transition question, we'll describe a roadmap to help guide you. But to start, we have to ask the seminal question. And this is the question that forward-thinking organizations have already been asking themselves. And it's a question that we suggest you too ask yourself. And that question is, what is the right hybrid workforce strategy specific to us that will, number 1, be reflective of our culture and minimize expenses and the threat to business continuity, while also maximizing productivity, talent attraction and retention, and financial results. So you see, it's these key business drivers that inform our answer to the question of what exactly are we transitioning to? Well, we want to transition to workforce strategies that achieve these goals. And in order to evaluate those workforce strategies, we start by understanding their benefits and challenges. So let's take a look. The benefits of a hybrid workforce strategy combine the best of remote work and the best of the shared office. At the top of the list for remote working is reduced commute and fewer interruptions. These 2 factors alone can potentially increase the annual productivity of each half-time remote worker by 16 business days a year. There are other potential benefits, such as reduced expense of real estate, employee turnover, absenteeism, and the personal costs to employees of reduced commute, clothes, and food. There are environmental benefits, and employees consistently state that their work-life balance is better. Now, on the other hand, the benefits of the office are time-proven and have really crystallized during the pandemic. Highlights on the screen include things that typically occur best in person, such as mentoring and serendipitous moments. But one benefit of both remote work and the shared office is the ability to recruit and retain talent. With 70% of employees wanting a hybrid workforce experience, which means both remote and office, most organizations will have to offer some degree of flexibility between home and office to recruit and retain the best and the brightest. Now, another key benefit of both remote work and the office is that together, and only together, they meet one of the innate human desires that has been ignited by the remote work experience. This desire is so powerful that it's shaping workforce strategy and real estate strategy around the globe. And that innate human desire is freedom. The freedom to choose. First, the freedom to choose when work is done. Employees want to work at any time of the day while blending in personal tasks or recreation. They no longer want to be held to a rigid 9-to-5 industrial age concept of punching the clock. The sentiment is, measure my output, not my input, and give me the freedom to decide how I schedule my day to get work done. And second, there's a very strong desire to choose where work is done. First, there's the simple geography of choosing among home, office, or other locations. But employees also want to choose among different environments inside of the shared office that are built for specific purposes. And examples include areas designed for focus work or teamwork, other areas for socialization, training, coffee bars, video conferencing rooms. Employees want options and variety, and ultimately the freedom to choose which location they determine is best to accomplish their work. However, even with all the benefits of a hybrid workforce environment, there are several challenges to be aware of and plan for. Separately, the challenges of remote work and a shared office have been experienced by us all. But what has not yet been experienced on a broad scale are the challenges associated with the hybrid workforce model. So we're going to highlight 3 challenging scenarios that organizations could be faced with in a post-COVID hybrid workforce environment. And the first challenge is the potential for disparity between teams. Let's take Team A. Team A has a manager who embraces a hybrid workforce. She's on board with the concept of giving you freedom to choose where and when you feel you can be the most productive. Periodically, she requires in-person meetings, but they're purposeful and well-run. She focuses on the output of your efforts, not the input of your time. Team members feel a strong spirit of freedom working for her. Then there's Team B. Team B is a manager who doubts the long-term effectiveness of a hybrid workforce. He's uncomfortable managing people he cannot see and requires in-office presence, although he does allow remote work 1 day of the week. When Team B looks at Team A, they feel constrained. So what's the outcome? Team B may feel jealous and dispirited. They wonder, can I switch teams? Or worse, should I leave my job? Another potential challenge is internal division within a hybrid team. Now in this scenario, we have in-office team members who are either full-time in the office or majority office, and then we have remote team members who are either full-time remote or majority remote. So if the boss spends most of her time in the office, then the in-office team members have proximity to her that remote members do not. This proximity may lead to real or perceived better career opportunities, choice assignments, promotions, etc., and better access to information. This is what Sid Sibrandy was talking about. What's the upshot of this scenario? Remote team members feel undervalued and dispirited. Teamwork is reduced, and they may wonder, can I switch teams? Or worse, should I leave this organization? If you're the VP overseeing this team, what do? How do you prevent this scenario? Yet another challenge of a hybrid workforce regards how to accommodate multiple employee profiles. And by profiles, we mean how and when employees choose to work. For example, Profile number one are employees who choose to work 3 days in the office and 2 days at home, or perhaps 2 days in the office and 3 days at home. Profile number two are in the office 100% of the time, but there's a cultural acceptance that if they take an afternoon or a day to work remotely, no big deal. And profile number three's default location is at home, but they attend periodic in-person team meetings and occasionally choose to drop in the office to work or even just to socialize. Challenge is, how do you accommodate all these profiles? What are the critical requirements to support them? Now, this next slide is really key to the awareness of what it takes to support a hybrid workforce. What should organizations do from the perspective of human resource policy, measuring performance, ongoing training, cultural norms, technology, cybersecurity, and developing a real estate strategy that will support each of these profiles at the same time? Should you even allow all these profiles? Is it any wonder or any surprise why many organizations feel paralyzed on this topic? Which brings us to another poll question, and that is, what's the most pressing challenge for your organization of a hybrid workforce? So I'm going to launch the next poll and go ahead and answer as I read through. But the questions are, for your organization, what do you see as the most pressing challenge of the hybrid workforce, looking over the horizon? Is it fairness for evaluations and promotions, morale and culture of the organization, human resource policies, redesigning office space? That certainly will be affected, could be affected. Unexpected costs, cybersecurity, collaboration issues, different teams being in different places, as we just discussed, some of those challenges, and then mentoring, like what Jamie Dimon referred to about most young people, or when you're new to an organization, you work under apprenticeship model, and the implication there is that's best in person. So we'll let the poll stay open for a little while here and see what the results are. Okay, we're about 72% of all votes in, so we're going to give it just another 10-15 seconds or so. Okay, almost there. And also, it may be hard to pick just one, and we understand that. Of course, no one's going to hold you to this, but it's interesting to see what the general view is on the most pressing challenges. So, okay, I think a very high percentage of votes are in, so we're going to end polling, and I will share results. So as you can see, and this is not surprising, it's pretty common for our poll, is that morale and culture of the organization comes in at number one with 59%. And but some others up there that are closely related would be collaboration, and of course we've got a couple of votes for redesigning office space and fairness of evaluations and promotions. So the culture and morale is very common. That's a really big one. Okay. So again, it's always really interesting to us. And one thing though that I do want to point out is that the challenge of redesigning office space, although it is very important, it's not the only challenge, but not so coincidentally, most of the real estate industry tends to focus narrowly on that one challenge, but clearly there are so many more challenges that need to be addressed and really need to be addressed first before contemplating the solution for physical space, which is why Cresa's motto is think beyond space. And the reason that we're able to do this effectively is because we don't have any pressure to support landlords and lease up their buildings. We only ever advocate for the occupier of space, which is you. Now, to address these challenges and create a successful strategy, you need a framework for developing the strategy. Interestingly, the framework to develop a successful workforce strategy can be built upon the same framework used to build a successful workplace strategy. We call it Workplace 2.0. And the first element is talent. A workplace is created to attract and retain the best and the brightest. A workplace should also foster an organization's culture and leverage technology to drive productivity. And finally, there's the physical space itself. Now, before the pandemic, it was only the shared central office that was designed and utilized for employee engagement, productivity, and satisfaction. But what's exciting and new is the concept of space being not only about the design and location of an office, but also offering the freedom to choose the best location, which drives employee engagement, productivity, and satisfaction. Workplace 2.0, it'll be different for each organization, each department, even each team and individual. There's no one right answer. But the good news is that you can use the key elements of the Workplace 2.0 paradigm to navigate to the right hybrid workforce strategy for your organization. So let's take them one at a time. But before we dig into the 4 elements, we thought it'd be interesting to conduct one final poll, just to get a feel for where everyone is in their own planning and decision-making regarding workforce strategy. So I'll launch this final poll. And stand by. Okay, so these questions are, has your organization determined its future workforce strategy? And it's either no, we haven't made any decisions and we haven't started planning, or B, you haven't made any decisions, but you have started official planning. And then C is, yep, we've decided what we're going to do for our workforce strategy, and what we need to do now is to create or implement our plan. And then second is, what kind of workforce strategy will your organization employ? And we completely understand if you're not certain yet, but you might be leaning one way. And it goes in the spectrum of fully remote to all the way to fully office for E. Or you might say, you know what, we don't have a single blanket strategy for the whole organization. It's going to be parsed out by department, job roles, leaders, etc. Or it may be, hey, you know what, we're not sure yet. And that's why we're here on the webinar, is to hear what you have to say about it. And that's perfectly fine too. So I'm going to give this just a couple more minutes. We're about 75% of the votes in again. I'm going to give it just another 10, 15 seconds or so, and then we'll see what everyone had to say. And I can see them coming in. It's interesting. There's no real clear winner for the second question. Okay, very high percentage of votes are in, so I'm going to end the poll and I will share results. So, has your organization determined its future workforce strategy? Looks like the majority, about half of you, haven't made any decisions, but you are in the planning phase. And that makes sense. Why you would be here and listening to this, getting some new ideas. Interesting, 32% just say, hey, we just need to implement our plan. That's great. And question number 2, what kind of workforce strategy will your organization employ? And it looks like, interesting, 41% are no single blanket strategy. And that makes a lot of sense too. It's going to depend, right? But then we've got fairly even split there among remote first. But it looks like there's none that are fully remote and none that are fully office. And that comports with what we're hearing well. So it looks like pretty much everyone's some type of hybrid. Okay. So back to the model, Workplace 2.0 model, and going through this. The first key element is talent. You have to determine which job roles are appropriate for remote work and which job functions might be modified to facilitate virtual processes and virtual collaboration. Next, you have to determine who has the personal aptitude for remote work. Not everyone who's in a job suitable for remote work is also a good fit for remote work. Personal assessments can help, especially when coupled with training, which leads to training for managers and employees. Managers may benefit from training to better manage a team that at any given time includes some people at home and some people at work at the same time. In addition, technology that enables remote work, it's constantly changing, and many employees don't know how to use the full slate of the technology that they already have. So technology training can be really helpful and should be a part of your program. And finally, eligibility requirements. These set expectations, that's so important, and provide structure. Companies can use key performance indicators and performance evaluations to establish and maintain eligibility. Culture is the second key element. When considering culture, a top priority is trust. Although for many companies, productivity stayed the same or even increased during the pandemic, employees need to trust that their manager can empower them to get their work done effectively. And many managers are learning a new way to lead in an environment where their team members are not sitting right in front of them or right next to them anymore. Equally as important to trust is communication. Good communication, both formal and informal, is critical to keep employees motivated and engaged. And in a hybrid environment, it needs to be high quality and high frequency, using platforms and mediums. The blend of trust and communications enables employees to feel informed and make independent, unsupervised decisions. Now, part of culture is also establishing group norms. A best practice is for teams to discuss and agree upon a short list of norms that guide team behavior and build comfort. These are just a few examples. They include setting certain days of the week as no meetings or no email hours, or setting a default time frame for meetings that's short, 15 minutes. Commit to the Q&A feature rather than the chat feature during video meetings to avoid distractions. And finally, commit to turning on everyone's laptop camera, including both those in the office and remote participants. And that speaks to value and job security. Because they are not as visible day to day, employees who work remotely a majority of the time need to feel a sense of job security and be treated equitably as valued members of the team. And that word equitably and equity is really, really important as you start to develop your policy so it can be applied equitably. And finally, there's socialization. Efforts to maintain team bonds are even more important in a hybrid environment. Many companies are really getting creative to build and maintain relationships among their hybrid teams. And on the left are just a few fun ideas that can be done remotely. So finally, I want to talk just on this one topic about some key statistics as you consider your strategy. As it relates to flexibility offered by businesses, nearly 70% of employers will implement a more flexible policy. About 80% are limiting, right now, they're limiting the number of on-site workers and customers and plan to do so going forward. And 2/3 of employers will strongly encourage the vaccination. And interestingly, some employees have said they will not come into the office unless staff are vaccinated. So this is a topic that needs to be addressed. Childcare has also emerged as a key driver. 1/3 of employers that already have set a return to office date have a childcare plan. And 70% of the remaining companies who do not currently have a worksite childcare plan to create one. Mental health has been an area of concern during the entire pandemic, and it's having a profound impact on the workplace. Many employees say they lost at least 10 hours a week of productivity due to mental health. That's 25% of a regular 40-hour schedule. Now, not surprisingly, the younger generations, Gen Z and millennials, experience the highest levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. But For some good news, the majority of employers will become more people-focused and are going to prioritize mental health going forward and the importance of emotional intelligence. These improvements are very positive and a welcome change. So for the technology element, I want to introduce my colleague, Steve Ike. As mentioned earlier, Steve has over 25 years of experience providing workforce strategy consulting to several successful large global businesses. Steve, I hand it over to you.
Jason, thank you so much. As we jump into technology, more than platforms and tools, it's a resource and an enabler that can be leveraged to create that on-demand work experience. As we look at how, when, and where people work, whether remote, in the office, or a combination of these, communication and collaboration platforms are the foundation for that purposeful interaction. Through real-time and near real-time communications, these platforms can be used for anytime, anywhere, one number reach across multiple devices, and can be combined with that shared workspace to meet, collaborate, and share ideas. Performance management focuses on that aspect of managing productivity versus activity and considers three areas: building trust, empowering employees, and driving productivity. It addresses that if I can't see, I can't manage, by evolving to if I can measure, I can manage. So performance management is both a process and set of tools that organizations use to measure and evaluate corporate performance and employee performance. It helps managers have meaningful conversations with employees and providing real-time access to information in a visual dashboard. In turn, this helps address that issue Jason brought up earlier. Those are faced with the in-office versus remote tension. And it provides consistent and measurable productivity, progress towards goals, and driving business outcomes. And with document management, it's really an online storage and a library using tools like Dropbox, Google Drive, and SharePoint, and combined with a management tool that is utilized to manage content, address security, who's the owner of the document, what's the version of the document, and how we distribute these documents and files across the organization. This facilitates real-time and anytime access that addresses process, workflows, and document control for things like a loan process in a financial services institution, claims management in an insurance organization, or even down to law firms where you may deal with a client matter or case file. And finally, cybersecurity and compliance. It's often the most overlooked and underanalyzed area for remote work. With more people at home, with more connected devices, this provides a chance for others to gain access to critical and secure information. There are technical considerations like wireless separation, secure connectivity, and intrusion detection. But just as important are the human factors, human errors, and threats. Those can be from within or external, can be intentional or accidental. And finally, as we look at those physical, that's a locked door capability or a secure laptop, and considers, the people that are around you, so we can address those no ears to hear, eyes to see what we're working on. And a key point in all of this is let's keep our work activities separate from our personal activities, with training that focuses on employee responsibility, IT security, and having a policy that addresses all of these different areas. We can act on these areas like phishing attacks or web activity that really secures the information on the company provided device or my personally provided device. So Jason, as we look, those four key areas really fit into how technology enables people to be more productive and part of the organization no matter where they work. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate that. Okay, finally, there's the physical space itself. To accommodate employees' desire for freedom of choice in where and when they work, organizations must view the workplace as a network of flexible, convenient, and on-demand places. Employees want the option to choose a workplace location where they feel they would be the most productive that day, or even just part of that day, which means freedom of movement will be important, whether between workplaces or even inside of workplaces, inside of the office. At the same time, in order to really make this effective, leaders must be purposeful about their frequency and method of collaboration. Team leaders must be intentional about when to use the office versus when to use digital tools. No one ever liked wasting time in their time in a meeting before the pandemic, and now they're certainly more sensitive to it, especially if they've got to drive in. They may be wondering, why did I make the commute and come all the way into the office for this meeting? You see, leaders are going to need to model the behavior of being organized and prepared and thoughtful about how to make the best use of everyone's time and build a culture of purposeful collaboration. So that's the 4 key elements, but we have a bonus key element, and that is policy. We felt that a clear corporate policy is so important that we included it as the 5th element. A clear policy is crucial to setting expectations, and as a leader, if you don't set expectations, your employees will set their own, and they will likely be different than yours. Hybrid workforce policies should address eligibility requirements, tools and resources the company will provide for home use, what the employee is expected to provide, and expectations for personal performance and participation, and finally, what constitutes disqualification. So, now that you've learned about the key elements of the Workplace 2.0 paradigm, you may be asking, okay, but what's the process for getting there? Where's the best place to start? So we're going to introduce you to a second key framework for developing a hybrid workforce strategy, which leads downstream to workplace design and real estate strategy. And the concept is be sequential to be successful. It all starts at the top. We believe that the 2 most important elements of success are leadership and culture. They are the umbrella which overhangs all success. Then, the fundamental business goals of operational productivity, recruiting and retaining talent, and maximizing financial results inform all decisions and drive behavior. And to support these business goals, you must follow a sequential path, starting with workforce strategy, followed by workplace strategy and design, and then real estate strategy. Too often, companies skip the human component of workforce strategy and go straight to step 2 or step 3. But at Cresa, we focus on the holistic picture, starting with the human component of the workforce, because real estate strategy is just one of the elements that supports the fundamental business goals. So here it is again. Step 1 drives step 2, which naturally leads to step 3. Be sequential to be successful. And when workforce strategy is addressed first, it gives you the freedom to design your workplace with the confidence that you're basing the design and the real estate strategy on meaningful information, but also that your real estate strategy won't have to adapt and change to a changing workforce strategy sometime down the road. You want to build your workplace design and the real estate strategy on solid rock, not shifting sand. So knowing this, it's important to begin by examining the critical requirements of a hybrid workforce strategy, being mindful that you'll now be supporting workers who are at home one day and in the office another day. And we believe this is a key differentiator for Cresa. We don't know of anyone else who starts their real estate strategy by evaluating the critical requirements of an upstream workforce strategy first. So here's the checklist that every organization should work through, and we'll send this in email with this list out to all attendees, so no need to jot down every bullet point right now. But if you'd like to have a conversation about your specific situation, please contact Steve or myself or the Cresa advisor who invited you to this webinar. We enjoy those open dialogues and sharing what we're seeing other organizations do. So the final question, the one from the very beginning of the webinar, is how do we transition? How should we evaluate all of those critical requirements to develop a successful and sustainable hybrid strategy? Cresa has developed a roadmap. It consists of 5 steps to methodically walk you through that process. And it begins with awareness. Learn the best practices. Understand the benefits and the challenges and become aware of the process. You're doing that today. Now, the next 3 steps we've combined into a workshop that's built on 3 phases. Phase 1 is discovery. It begins with a kickoff meeting where you build your team and establish goals. And then we conduct surveys and interviews to evaluate your organization in light of the critical requirements. Phase 2 is analysis. Here we identify any critical requirement gaps that we found during discovery and determine solutions to meet your goals. Phase 3 is delivery of an executive summary with recommendations to fill the gaps, as well as application of best practices to your specific situation and advice on your remote work policy. This workshop takes about 4 weeks, and one of the major benefits is it provides a structured, methodical process for leadership teams to have conversations about their future workforce strategy, and really, it builds consensus about the pathway forward and gets you out of first gear past any potential point or feeling of paralysis. So ultimately, this enables clear and consistent communication to employees. The 5th step of the roadmap is implementation of the plan. And for this, we offer a more robust blueprint plan, which includes everything from the workshop, but a deeper dive into discovery and analysis, and then follow on monitoring and feedback over a 60, 90, and 120-day period. So with that, let me offer a summary. First, the desire for freedom is changing where and when we work. As important as a shared central office is, this desire for freedom of choice demands that most organizations develop a hybrid workforce strategy. And to get there, transition is key. We're currently enduring the COVID-19 experience, but just over the horizon is unimpeded access to your shared office. And how you transition to that new hybrid work environment will determine how sustainable and competitive you will be. And then finally, be sequential to be successful. Remember, it only makes sense to develop your workspace design and real estate strategy after you've evaluated the human component of your workforce strategy and all the critical requirements that make it successful. Give yourself meaningful information to inform your decision-making and build your strategies on solid rock, not shifting sand. So that is that's our webinar. We really appreciate the time that you have allowed us here today. We've got about 10 minutes left for any Q&A. And I do just for a moment, while you're thinking about any questions that may have popped up, and there's a couple that have come in. Our contact information is on the screen. If you found something that was interesting, or you have a question about your own specific situation that you want to discuss, please reach out to us. Or again, as I mentioned, the Cresa advisor who invited you to the webinar. So let me check the Q&A here while sharing. Okay, so one question is, I think this is for Steve. What are examples of tools that help measure time, productivity, and engagement of hybrid employees? So tools that help measure time, productivity, and engagement of hybrid employees.
So yeah, let's kind of break that into first, what do we want to measure? And as we all know, more and more information is gathered across different areas and compiled in everything from Salesforce to ERP systems to others. And what you need is a tool that sits in the middle. And these tools can then capture data from those contributors and then present it into a meaningful dashboard. So what we want to do with this is compile data from HR information systems and employee management systems, to your Salesforce, your CRM systems, and your enterprise resource planning systems, and then mash that up together and present it. One of the ones that we've seen high utilization of, and we actually use internally as well, is Tableau. So Tableau can take these different areas, combine that data, mash it up, and present it into a meaningful format. But you really want to combine this with your HR management systems as well. So most companies already have one in place, but you want to make sure that you're using this as a tool to coach and manage and measure goals, but you need that one system that can compile all the data and put it into a good dashboard type report.
Perfect. Okay, that's good. Yeah, there's a whole school of thought and a ton of different resources out there for that. It's a great question. So a couple more questions coming in. Do you have any insights as to the percentage of companies now offering furniture for the home as part of company costs to support a hybrid organization? It's interesting because we have just recently been doing more and more research on how to solve this issue for our clients, different options for them. And Steve, I don't have any insight into the percentage of companies that are offering that. Our experience has been that most offer some degree of a stipend or an allowance, and there's a debate over what to call that officially from a human resources perspective. But do you want to take that as well, Steve?
I definitely want to take that. So first, we see this as increasing. More and more companies see this as a way to provide an offset on that employee expense so that they can have not only a productive workspace, but an ergonomic workspace so that they can be happy, healthy, and productive employees. So to answer the question on the percentage, it is increasing every day. And I want to add to that is kind of the so what and how much. We do see the initial setup going anywhere in between $500 to $1,000 to allocate to that employee, whether it be an expense that is reimbursed or a allocation that is provided. And Jason and I have been seeing a lot of companies, and we're working with folks now that can provide that as a service so that you don't need to take that on. So you can create a portal so that the employee can go in for their allowance, order the equipment, and have it shipped home. But I'm going to put the caveat in this. When you're looking at the equipment and that allocation of $500 to $1,000 as well as the monthly offset for expense, please work with your CFO and your accounting teams to determine what's the best way to handle that, because you don't want to get into a taxable event for your employees if you're giving them money.
Yep. That's exactly
the second
right.
is develop a plan and come to consensus as to what is your corporate allowance going to be, and how much you're going to provide as a one-time, and then how you're going to offset that monthly expense of internet connectivity and wireless access for those home users.
Great, thank you. So another question that came in, and I'll start on this one, Steve, then I'll let you jump in, is who is typically included in the workshop that you offer? And I believe they're asking who is interviewed or surveyed, et cetera. And that's easy. Conceptually, it's easy. To decide specifically is perhaps not so easy, but we'll survey the entire organization as appropriate. Many organizations have done surveys already. Maybe they're ready to do another survey, or they've got some ideas, and then we work collaboratively with them to survey everyone in the organization. But then specifically, what we call the core team, we highly recommend that be senior leadership members in the organization representing different departments, so that each department, at least each major department, gets a voice. And IT, we think, is very important to include in that, technology, because that's what, whatever decisions are made by the business, IT has to support, and it's quite painful when things go hard down and don't work because we're so dependent on it nowadays. So it's typically a CFO. Someone in HR is also very, very important for that team. Operations, it could be sales and marketing, and then technology. Steve, any other thoughts?
You captured all the folks that should be involved, and you want to make sure that when you look at HR and IT specifically, they're the ones that make the work happen, but it's the operations, finance, sales, and marketing teams that are looking at how do we drive the efficiency and productivity of the organization. So include all of them at the highest level possible, and then survey not only once, but multiple times across the organization to find out how are we doing and what would you like to accomplish.
So we've got only a couple of minutes here, but I do want to try to get to these questions. One is, what would you suggest for companies moving, or the organization, when they're moving into open space? So this is space that's designed for a hybrid workforce with staff coming into the office a few days a week as it pertains to noise distraction, right? And that's one of the big sort of negatives or a ding against the in-office environment is interruptions and distractions. And so I think this is an opportunity to candidly to work with a workplace strategist. Cresa has those two. That's that, as I mentioned, the sequential process starts with the workforce, then goes workplace, and then the real estate strategy. But there are experts who they spend their days designing office space and helping your organization come up with its cultural norms. I think that's another big piece, because you can design the physical space, but you've also got to work with the people. And I think it's a matter of good communication and coming up with what are our cultural norms as it regards, is this a library? Is this a romper room? For those who are familiar with Bozo the Clown or older like me. So I think that you as an organization have to sit down and really set those cultural norms.
Yep. And really
support that, the design of the space.
And Jason, it's really not only the open cube space in farms, but the purpose-built spaces to meet and collaborate and have those teaming events and cross-teaming events to make sure that you include those as part of your plan.
Great. Well, look, we didn't get to every question. Please email me if I didn't get to your question, or Steve or the Cresa advisor who invited you. We will follow up with a recording of the webinar. Please share it with anyone that you think would be interested or would benefit. And again, 2 weeks from today, we're doing it again, and we'll do it 2 times a month, second and fourth Tuesday of each month at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.